He's a senior lecturer in surgery at Monash University. He's an upper gastrointestinal surgeon, and he's a keen student of mind-body connection and its power in shaping our real world. Dr. Dheer has been pioneered integrative approach to surgical healing, which he incorporates in his practice. And as a member of the Australian College of Environmental and Nutrition Medicine and a certified yoga and mindful teacher with Yoga Australia. So Arun, I would like to invite you to tell us what's the connection between our mind and body. Dr. Arun.
So Anu, firstly I wanted to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come and share some of our thoughts and ideas with you. I want to reassure everyone that surgery is not on my prescription pad today. Okay, so just relax. It's just about sharing some ideas with everyone here, and I'll just grab the pointer. I guess I want to share with you a little bit about, who I am and what sort of, what brings me here, because it's rather unusual for a surgeon to be coming and, talking on health and wellness and mind and body sort of connection. Well, my disclaimers are here. In the interest of time, I'll just skip it for the moment. I like this quote from Buckminster Fuller, and as Alison spoke about change, and I think you never change things by fighting existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And can I say something, that modern medicine is going through this change at the moment. We are seeing a huge, I call it the new science, but it's really not that new. We knew about it centuries ago. We're kind of reinventing now, and we are rediscovering and finding out how it can be applied to get better outcomes, because the old model, or the so-called old model of medicine now, is that you're not well, go to the doctor, get a prescription, pop in some pills, and expect that everything will get better, and you just continue what you're doing. So the sense of responsibility that individuals would take was not there. And that's where the whole concept of integrative medicine or integrative surgery, as we have now developed in our practice, and I've left some brochures at the back just to give you some information on what this whole concept of integration is, just to make you all aware about, where we are heading forward. Now, whenever I start a presentation, one of my favorite topics is gut health. And I'll delve into this in a little bit of detail. But I start with this photo of a soccer field. Now, a soccer field and the human gut, there's only one thing that is in common. If you took the human gut and stretched it out flat, absolutely flat on a ground, as we all know, there are these finger-like projections on the inside of the human gut. That would take up the surface of the soccer field. So this is the power of the human gut. It exposes our human body. People think skin is the most exposed organ to the outside. No, it's the human gut. So anything that we are putting into our mouth is actually becoming a part of us. So you become what you eat. And that is so very true. The unique aspects of the human gut is that 9 to 9.5 meters in length, but what is making it so unique now, and we've figured it out, that there are about 100 trillion bacteria that call it home. 10 times more than the number of cells that are there in the body. And mind you, the human gut and these bacteria are intelligent. They are interacting with us through the enteric nervous system, which is basically the gut-brain connection, and it produces the gut feeling. We all have experienced it from time to time, and that's nothing else but the serotonin and the dopamine that is flowing whenever, and the human gut is the largest source of that hormone, that the happy hormone that our body stores. So these gut flora, and let me be honest over here, we have only managed to culture 30% of these bacteria in our laboratories. The 70% we still don't know about. I don't know whether you heard about the Human Genome Project. The Human Genome Project was, set up as a big, massive, multi-billion-dollar funded project, which actually spoke about, how can we actually map the complete human gene, which they managed to do, and they were all surprised that there were only 22,000 genes in variations in the human gene, whereas what makes every individual so unique is the genetic material that is there in these bugs, and that a lot of it we don't even know at this stage. So the idea is that the gut flora is changing all the time based on what it is being fed. And that is one of the very key determinants, that it could even hold the key to how we can change the gut flora to prevent obesity, autism, diabetes, asthma, and lots of these medical problems that we don't know a clue about in terms of how we can treat it in the longer run. We can sort of temporarily palliate the symptoms, for want of a better word. But these gut bacteria essentially do lots of helpful functions for us. It used to be thought not that long ago that the best bug is a dead one. No longer true. So that's why we invented so many of these antibiotics, left, right, and center. Almost every patient in the hospital would be given antibiotics, and soon it was found that these bugs were one step ahead of us, and they would come up with these resistance to antibiotics. So essentially, oops, sorry, I put, accidentally. So they not only break down the food that we eat and break the nutrient stuff that is in, but also perform scavenger functions such as cleaning and all of that. So very, very vital. But they also have protective functions and immunological functions, which actually allow us to form a first line of defense against any allergens. When I was growing up, I had never heard so much of things like fructose allergies and sucrose allergies. Last time I met a patient of mine who said they're allergic to avocados. Now, I had never heard of that. So I guess we are living in this world where allergies are just coming up one after the other, and the answer of that for that problem could be in the gut. Now, as I said, we are kind of rediscovering or reinventing this whole thing. And Hippocrates, the father of medicine in 350 BC, had said, all disease begins in the gut. Surely he understood there is a connection. And that is very true. And that's how we are beginning to understand all of this, that now obesity and metabolic syndrome, as we term it more from a risk projection, is affiliated or associated with poor gut microbiome. Even cancers, even autoimmune diseases are associated with an unhealthy gut microbiome. And also, this is how it starts. It starts with this condition called as a leaky gut. And a leaky gut is something that will lead to all these factors. These are triggers that cause the damage to these cells, which are normally holding nice and tight and snug against each other, so they prevent anything foreign to go in without that thing being sensed by these finger-like projections. But when there is inflammation, stuff just can go through very easily and create all these heaps of problems, autoimmune status, inflammation, and that is one of the key things. So inflammation, in the banking industry, of course, we hear the big four, and we always think of the big four that but the big four for us in medicine are, and I'll just touch upon that in a moment, is obesity, cancers, diabetes, and cardiovascular problems. That's the big four for us. The future of the health burden in the world is not going to be infectious problems, because we have overcome them. We have eradicated polio. We've almost eradicated smallpox. That's not a problem for us. The problem is these four diseases, and the basis of all of them is inflammation. Inflammation is nothing else, but it really means on fire. It is constantly the best example that I can give is the engine of the car is constantly running. You go home, you park the car, but you just don't turn off the car engine, and next day you put it again in reverse, take it back out of the driveway and drive again. So the car is constantly running, and that is going to wear out. So that's where all of this comes. I'll skip this slide because this is more about the gut microbiome. But again, the evolution, the new science, our medical school teaching was the human gut, the brain is the center of everything, and the human gut is an organ, just like any other organ. However, there is now a definite gut-brain axis. People have researched it, and that influences, it's one of the influences on, as Alison said, on your habits, on your mood, on your stress levels, by way of the transmitters or the chemicals that these gut bugs are producing while they are in the gut. There have been books that have been written as well on it. And this is where stress, food choices, and the gut microbiome interact to determine what exactly is going to be your preference, hence determining your habit eventually. So this was a very interesting study that was done in the University of California, San Francisco, and they actually looked at individuals who were, so they measured cortisol, which is a measure of your stress response. So what they did was they actually took high reactors and low reactors by measuring their cortisol levels, which is, they would subject the individual to a cortisol, to a stress, and measure their cortisol levels. Now what they then did was they actually, again my apologies, they actually then tested that what is their calorie intake whenever there is a stress response. And you could see that the individuals who were high reactors, which is here, their calorie intake or their preference was much higher because they were high stress responders. And that lends support to the theory that essentially the stress actually influences your calorie intake. And not just you could be getting your calories from fruits and vegetables. No, it is the bad calories. It is the calorie dense foods that you tend to go for. And that's what the body wants, all in line with the fight and flight response in order to preserve yourself. And in keeping with this, you can see that the obesity rates, all projected up to 2030 in this bar, show that we are not that far behind from the heaviest country in the world. And this is not going to slow down, and we currently see this. And as a part of what I do, I see this, and it is, disheartening to see individuals in the most productive years of their life being held back because of their weight. So it is kind of the weight of the problem. Again, the big four, I won't delve much into it. But this is where the concept of health comes in. Health is not just merely absence of disease or infirmity. It is really an optimal state of balance in terms of physical, mental, and social being. And I believe very strongly in it, and I discuss this with my clients who come sometimes for a quick fix. When it comes to surgery, get a quick fix done and job is done. But that doesn't happen all the time. So the concept of healthy aging comes from the fact that 0 to 40, generally speaking, the incidence of disease is not that much, okay? But after 40, it starts to go up exponentially. And this is a bit of a wake-up call for many of us. So the concept of healthy aging is really, the aging process will continue, but if we are able to keep it above the disease threshold, that is what is called healthy aging. If we compare ourselves with our forefathers, really, when initially, the lifespan was short, but the age-related disease span was short too. We are now living longer. The mean age now is about 83 years, which is pretty good, I can tell you that. But the thing is that the lifespan has increased, but the health span has not increased that much. And this is something that we need to understand. We talk about all these things that our hospitals are under strain and all these things. I think there has to be a wake-up call for all of us to engage in self-care. That is a very, very important aspect of it. So I think this is where the whole concept of chronological age and biological age comes. Again, without delving too much into it, most of us understand it. Chronological age is really what is written on your passport and also what is there on your birth certificate. But biological age is what your body is at what level is it functioning. So this is where it is extremely crucial to understand that some of the things around chronological age you cannot change with mind-body approaches and the rest. Whereas with the biological age, you could have a 70-year-old person who could be looking as fit as some of the 40-year-olds. Now, look at this, these two women are approximately same age. And I'm sure we come across individuals like this. So which life are we designing for ourselves? Talking about that, we'll just take a little step back. The key thing is that the human body is composed of cells. We all know this. These cells start from a stem cell and then it goes into different kinds of cells. It could be gut cells, heart cells, nerve cells which form the brain. So it's the cells which clump together with a defined function, they form an organ. Now, when we talk about cellular aging, the whole process is that when this cell starts to age and die faster, that's what leads to an aging cell, and an aging cell ages from its center, which is the engine. The engine is the nucleus, which is where all the nuclear material is settling. And this is what happens to the nuclear material. Now, I don't want to make it too complex for you, but it is very simple in terms of understanding that a lot of people are, living with this concept that I've got a genetic problem, I've got a hereditary problem, and I can't do anything about it. Now, they have found out that 95% of our genes can be modified. Okay, this was like a wake-up call for, it's different to what used to be thought, that, it was thought that, oh, I've got this gene, I'm doomed. We've all heard about Angelina Jolie, who underwent the double mastectomy because of the BRCA1 gene. Now, yes, there is a 50% chance based on this, but what is also relevant is that 95% of the genes can be modified. And one of the things that modifies them, and we'll come to that in a moment, what happens with the whole process of aging? As the cell is dividing constantly, the genetic material, which is the chromosome, is dividing. So the one cell divides into two, two into four, and all of that. But this is what determines how long the cell will keep dividing. And this is called the telomere cap. It's like a cap at the end of this sausage-shaped thing, which is called the chromosome. And as you can see, as the cell is dividing, this telomere is getting short and short and short until this point comes when it no longer can divide. That's it. Now, the shorter your telomeres, the higher is your biological age. The longer your telomeres, it's got an inverse relation. The longer your telomeres, the younger your biological age. Now, we want to try and aim for a younger biological age, all of us. So, what they found was that at age 25, good length of telomeres. Age 45, they have been shortened further. Age 60, shortened further. Age 75, almost gone, cell dies. Okay. Now, when lots of cell die, it leads to cell death. So, shorter the telomeres, higher is your biological age, as I just told you. But as the cell dies, one of two things happen. Either it leads to the function of that organ starts to fade off. So, you can't, whatever it is, whichever organ it is, the brain is not functioning well, leading to dementia. Heart is not functioning well, leading to cardiac failure. All of that. And the other thing is loss of regulation. What happens with loss of regulation is some of these cells start to have a mind of their own and they start to grow up. And we know what happens. What is that called? That's called a cancer. And that is what happens with this. So all issues with aging essentially stem from this cellular death, this cellular process that is going on. So I want to keep it interesting for you. I know I don't want to make it too complicated, but I think one of the key things that was very pertinent was how stress affects the length of these telomeres. Now I'm talking about how stress is influencing your genes. So this is serious stuff because all of us have been talking about genes is something that we are born with. Now they did study on caregivers. Now you and I, we all know that any individual who has been looking after their disabled child or anyone who's, they've sort of got a family member who is not able to look after themselves, so they are the primary caregivers for them. It is a very stressful situation to be in because there is nothing like, I'm going home now, so I can relax, put my feet up and all. So these caregivers were identified as a group that has got perpetually high levels of stress. And that's what they found in this study that was, a study which was published in the Journal of Immunology, which said if you looked at the stress of workplace and shortening of telomeres, caregivers had a shorter telomere length in comparison to controls, which is a pertinent finding. But more important was that the length, the chronicity of caregivers, the number of years that kept going on, it also reduced or sped up the rate at which the telomeres were getting shorter. Again, very pertinent finding in terms of this. They also looked at individuals who had a childhood adversity event. And the more the number of events, the shorter is their telomere length. So none, one, multiple, and that's where you can see. So these are all things that they investigated in terms of, how our stress is actually influencing our genes. We are almost doing, so when we talk about doing a meditation exercise, it's almost like doing genetic engineering, which is something like, who had heard of that? So this is a fantastic book that if anyone's interested in reading a little bit more about it, Telomere Effect, the same lady who did the study that I just presented is over here. Fantastic book. But again, on the issue of stress, I'd probably say that the bottom line of how stress causes damage is through generating free radicals. I'm sure all of us have heard this term, free radicals. Free radical is nothing else but it's a molecule that has got no electron in it and is wanting to react with its neighbors such that it causes damage. Essentially, so what do we do to kind of reprogram ourselves? And that's the big question now. Okay, all this talk. Okay, another study, unfortunately, but I have to base my comments on an evidence. And the thing is that this study, published in a very well-reputed journal, said that a few things that can certainly affect the cellular aging and the telomere length, and of those two key things were smoking and obesity. Two key things that an individual can work on, and they found that there was a dose-dependent relationship. So there was a dose-dependent relationship between the number of years of smoking and also how short the telomeres were. They also took an example in traffic policemen. They have a fairly stressful job sometimes regulating the, I think in this day and age, everyone has got a stressful job, we can say that. But they took that as a sample. So we've been talking about the stress. What is this stress? What is all this thing about stress? And now, again, I will not go into the definitions of this, but the only way how I would describe it is in the modern day and age, asking someone to be without stress is like asking a fish to live without water. We are all having a level of stress, let's be honest about it. With the barrage of information that is being thrown at us with emails, messages, Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp and all of that, we struggle. And we all think that we take a lot of pride in saying we can multitask. I know my wife often says that, she's very good at multitasking. But I think research has proved that when you are multitasking, you're spreading yourself very thin. And when you're doing that, you are basically taking on the work of 10 different people rather than focusing mindfully, as Alison just mentioned, on one task and doing it well. When you try and do too many things at one time, that is what builds up stress. And that's the best way how I can describe it. There are descriptive terms for it, and I won't go into that. But let's not forget, stress is good and bad. We need stress. We need that optimal level of stress. And what they find is, it's like the bell curve. In statistics we describe there's a bell curve. The best portion is to be in that central optimal range. If you've got too much stress, you've got anxiety and neural disorders. If you have too little stress, then you just don't have a motivation to do anything. You just don't want to get up and do something. That's what is called depression. Okay? So you want to be in the green zone, as we call it. You want to be there. So there is good stress, there is bad stress. And what we need to understand is there needs to be a strategy to be able to cope with stress. And that doesn't happen when stress is mounted to this level. It has to be with small doses every day. Every day you've got to sort of, work towards it. Okay, so types of stress, again, I think as I said to you, inflammation is the central, I should say, common denominator of all these disease processes. And the one thing that we have identified which is feeding it is chronic stress. See, we all face acute stress, which is short-term stress from time to time. A student who's going to take an exam will be having stress, but once the results are there, he's done it, great, the stress is over. But it's the chronic stress, the constant worrying, the constant rumination, that is what gets us. And I think if there's one message that I can give from this presentation, is that we all need to take a step back and prioritize. Always prioritize, because I think that's the key thing. These are just some statistics. Again, 2/3 of Australians lost sleep in the past due to stress, and a lot of it was financial stress from the banks putting up their rates all the time, you know. So you have to take some responsibility for that. 78%, look at that. Anyways, I'm just kidding. So I guess let's talk about all this thing around mindfulness. And there is a lot of attention, a lot of science that is going on about it, and this is where the whole thing around the antidote is. So can diet help manage stress? I think I'll skip that, because yes, it can, but it'll take me outside the scope of this presentation at this stage. But what is mindfulness? Look, the simplest way how I can describe it, and the founder, John Kabat-Zinn, who actually started this whole movement, describes this called heartfulness, just being present in the moment. If you actually understand, the only moment that you're alive is now. The past is gone, the future no one has seen. So it is about being grounded in the moment. And if you can take out time for yourself, you realize that you then start observing everything in a non-judgmental manner. You don't want to make a preference. You don't observe a like or a dislike. You don't sort of pass judgments on anything. And that is what leads to that inner calmness. And that's where this whole concept of mindfulness has started. Now, mindfulness is no longer just restricted to some, sages doing it on the top of the Himalayan, mountains. We have done research in medicine now. And there is research done now on immune system, how mindfulness affects patients with ulcerative colitis. JDL presented a very good study in the Journal of Gastroenterology, where individuals who have got issues with, there's another study, by the way, on individuals who have got irritable bowel syndrome, which is increasing in leaps and bounds in our society, has got an association with the stress levels of the individual. This is well documented now. Metabolic syndrome, cancer, and other psychological problems. So there is research to prove the evidence behind it. In our own practice, what we have come up with this concept of integrative gut surgery, and individuals who come to me for having procedures, they go through this program called integrative gut surgery, where the first goal is their stress management and goal setting, because we know now that psychology affects wound healing, and not just wound healing, it is the internal healing as well, anything that we do. Then gut detox, diet, and supplements. And on this, this is of course applied to multiple different kind of specialities. But the thing is that it creates a healthy inner gut lining, and that is key to the whole healing process. Then is exercise and breath control. See, our breath is the basis of why we are alive. And that allows the metabolism to be fully charged up, and then balancing the gut microbiome. I think I can only emphasize it to this point that having this integrative approach has created, this is a program that we are now taking to a formal study, because we are so convinced that there is so much benefit to the individuals by integrating it. We have done things in the past in an isolated manner, that all right, after your surgery, take some multivitamins, or after an illness, take multivitamins. But when you do it as a program, when you do it collectively, that's where the power is. And even giving things like probiotics. Curcumin is like a turmeric, that's the active ingredient. Vitamin C and vitamin E and plant-based protein are the best things that you can do for balancing the gut microbiome. So we've got a team of dietitians, and Alison works with us as well in our group. So, it's a collective team that actually brings about this effect for the individuals. We've recently launched a program, and a book is, my book is coming up in the month of July, which is the weight loss game, and this is non-surgical weight loss. So anyone who's interested in this can also log on to that website and have a little look. So, friends, future direction determines current action. As we all know, I'm going to just wrap it up. the one question that my patients ask me is, where do I start? You know, like, okay, this is great and, you know, got fantastic science and I'm convinced now, where do I start? So the first thing is, do you have a goal? Is there a goal? Is there a burning desire to achieve that goal? And I ask my patients whether this goal is something that is a lot of them say, oh, I want to be happy, I want to be healthy, I want to be rich. No, these are not goals, these are wishes, okay? A goal is something that is directed, that is time bound, and it is written. So you know exactly that you are going to achieve it and it is believable to you. You can't have a goal that, okay, I'm going to go to the moon tonight, you know, that's not believable, you know. So that is where it all starts. And I always tell them that the most important person in your world is who? I ask them, you know, who's the most important person? They might say, oh, it's my spouse, it's my brother, it's my sister, and all of that. No, it is the person you look at every day in the morning in the mirror, and that is the person who's most important for you. So it's you who has to change. And I think someone asked the question, oh, how do I get my kids to, you know, change because they don't listen, or something on those lines. Look, I'm a parent as well. And the thing is, kids will always replicate what the parents do. Absolutely, you know. For those of you who are not parents as yet, I can tell you that the kids will they're constantly observing you. They might be you might see them as just playing with their toys and all that. No. So I say, change yourself first. Once you change, you will see the change in the world outside. So, last thing, what is a question for you? What is the most important part of this seminar or meeting? Any clues? Anyone? Great. Thank you so much. All right. So look, thank you so much for your attention. I know I bored some of you, but look, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take any questions. Otherwise, Anu, thank you so much for the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas. We are quite passionate about this and would be happy to be contacted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.